Hey everyone, welcome back to The New Critic, and today we're going to be looking at Season 7 of The Walking Dead. So in this season, Rick and the group are now under the rule of Negan and the Saviors, and they're at their lowest point. Slowly but surely over the course of the season, with the help of some other communities, they band together and rise up against Negan in order to take back their freedom. So this season is, as I said in my last video, the lowest point of The Walking Dead because it received some of the worst reviews, and this is when ratings began to decline. Looking back at the show's ratings, the first season started off pretty well with about 5 to 6 million per episode, and then it rose and rose. And then Season 5 was the peak of the show, both critically and commercially, with about 15 million viewers per episode. And then Season 6 was about 13 million, but that's mainly due to the slow pace of it. And from Season 7 onwards, ratings plummeted, mostly due to the events of this season and the next season. For instance, this season marked the beginning of the show's reliance on marketing stunts rather than the actual quality of the show, and characters were bound to die in premieres, mid-season finales, mid-season premieres, and of course finales, and it was just so predictable. And while the ratings are still decent today, they're nowhere near as good as they used to be. But let's get into the pros and cons, shall we? So first of all, I really enjoyed the premiere episode as we find out who Negan killed at the end of Season 6. And while this particular character's death may have cast a shadow on the show as a whole in the later seasons, it didn't really bother me as much as I thought it would. Seeing the characters at their lowest point may be depressing for some, but for me, it kind of made sense to feel that way. One of the major criticisms of Season 7 is the violence, especially in the premiere episode. So much so that in the second half, the gore needed to be edited down. I thought the gore was actually well handled in this season, and the brutality of it didn't bother me at all. I mean, the longer the show's gone on, the bloodier it's gotten, and it kind of made sense. And that's kind of what I expected out of the show anyway. Getting our introductions to the new communities was one of the highlights. We're introduced to the kingdom, which is run by King Ezekiel, played by Carrie Payton, who is, in case you don't know, the voice of Cyborg in several media. There's an all-female community called Oceanside. There's the Junkyard, which is an original creation, not from the comics, and it's a community run by the Scavengers. And of course, Negan's community, known as the Sanctuary. We get a little bit more of the Hilltop community that was introduced in Season 6, and there's some interesting conflict between the community's leader, Gregory, and Maggie, who everybody starts to look to as a much better leader. Carol is beginning to stray away from her mental state in the second half of Season 6, and is slowly becoming the badass she was in Season 5 again. Morgan has decided to drop the whole all life is precious philosophy, and it's perfect timing considering the circumstances of the characters. This season also attempted to humanize Dwight, a character that a lot of people hated in Season 6, and it works perfectly. But the real star of the season is Negan, played by Jeffrey Dean Morgan, and fans have a weird relationship with him as a character, because he's done some despicable things, but he's fun to watch. He has a great sense of humor, and you kind of want him to stick around despite the fact that you hate him. And the finale had one of the most hopeful conclusions I've seen in this show. Now, the biggest problem with this season is that the material was stretched needlessly thin. As a result, Season 7 felt like a season-long build-up to what we all wanted to see, which is the all-out war between Rick and Negan. And I know it has to start off with the characters being at their lowest point and stuff like that, but even then it was a slog. There were too many bottle episodes focusing on individual characters and communities, and it felt like things were going nowhere. In fact, there's an episode called Service where Negan visits Alexandria and demands supplies and food rations and so on. It was an hour long and it really didn't need to be that long, considering it focuses solely on Alexandria. I'm not saying you should skip any episodes because technically each episode has something of importance, but because of that, it's going to bore you at times. The characters made some idiotic decisions from time to time as usual, and it's becoming tiresome at this point. The zombies feel like an afterthought in this season and season 8 because they focus so much on Negan and the Saviors as the villains, which is important, but it still bugged me. It's just that they don't pose all that much of a threat anymore to the characters. And let's not forget the lack of a proper budget for this season, because there's a really bad CGI deer in one episode, and there's a really bad green screen in another episode. I guess it's because they spent so much of their effects budget on Shiva, the CGI tiger, which looks pretty impressive by the way, that they ran out of money for other effects as well. So yeah, that was my review of season 7 of The Walking Dead. It's not a terrible season, but it's the one season in the main show that I consider to be just mediocre at best. It's something that should have been rethought before going forward. Next time we're going to be looking at season 3 of Fear the Walking Dead. So thank you all for watching. Please be sure to like the video, share it and subscribe, and hit the notification icon. Be safe during this time, and I'll see you soon.